this video, we're going to break down the rotate array prompt, and then we're going to write up some pseudocode so that we can kind of solve it. And then it'll be up to you to translate that pseudocode into Python. Okay, so let's get started with the umpire process. So, biggest one, let's understand the prompt. Given an array, rotate the array to the right by k steps, where k is non-negative. What is the key action here? This is the first key action where we're not just returning some value that we found. So what we're doing, our key action is rotating the array to the right by k steps. So what does rotate really mean? Are we taking the array and turning it on its side? No. Let's look at the outputs to kind of get an idea. What do we mean by rotate? Well, it looks like our inputs, we can ask ourselves, what are our inputs? Well, it looks like a list is our input, and then k equals 3. So it looks like our data types are a list in Python, an array, and a number, k, which will be 3. It says where k is non-negative, so we know that k is going to be a number, and then it's not going to be a negative number. So it's going to be a positive integer. Now, what I do notice is that I don't see anything about what are we supposed to then return, or what's our output value. So I'm going to keep looking, and it looks like down at the bottom, there's a note here that says, do not return anything. Modify the input array in place instead. That means that rather than returning a solution that I have found, I'm not finding, I'm not returning, I'm modifying something in place. Similar to something like the extend function or the append function on lists, what we're really doing is modifying the original array rather than changing or creating a new array. So that's a really key thing to understand in this prompt, is that we're not returning something. We are modifying the original array. So all the tests will have to check to see that the original array has been modified rather than, relying on the return value. Now we kind of have an understanding of what it is. What are we supposed to do? But let's look at the examples and kind of, internalize these examples. So if our input is an array of the first 7 numbers starting at 1, and k is 3, so what we're supposed to rotate, we're supposed to rotate the array to the right. So if you kind of think of this as like a dial, we basically want to spin the dial so that then 1 is sort of here in the middle, right? And that's what it means by rotate it to the right. You're just deep, 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 and kind of moving it over, right? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4 is over here, and then 5, 6, and 7 are over here. So kind of what's happened is that these last 3, k being 3, get moved over to here. So we can kind of watch that happen, rotate 1 step to the right. So if this was 1 step to the right, basically we would just be taking the 7 off the end and putting it in the beginning. With 2, it's taking the 7 and the 6 off to the end and then putting them in the beginning. With 3, it's taking all 3 and putting them in the beginning. Now, let's look at another array that's not just the first few numbers, so that we can make sure that we understand. All right, so our original array is -1, -100, 3, and 99. K is 2, so without looking at the output, I'm just going to cover it. I'm going to guess what I mean. I'm just covering my screen here with my hand. And so what I'm going to do is say, okay, so that means that 99 and 3 need to come to the front, basically, and be in front of 1 and 0. Okay, now I'm looking at my output. Okay, 3, 99, 1, 100. Okay, so that makes sense to me. All right, so then what I know that I'm going to be doing is operating on the array, and I know that I'm going to be not using like concatenating things or anything like that. What I'm doing is I'm modifying this array. Okay, so let's start writing ourselves kind of since we have like pictures here, we can kind of see it happening step by step. This is like one number at a time. So I will say basically it looks like we start by removing the first number from the end and then putting it at the beginning. And then in the next step, we take the next number, 6, off the end and we put it on the beginning. And in the next step, we take the next number on the end and we put it in the beginning. And now we've done that 3 times. So I know since I'm going to have to be doing some sort of like over and over again thing, because we got to do the K. K is like how many times do we do this operation, right? So I know the first operation I'm really doing is take the number from the end of the list and put it on the beginning of the list. And then I want to do that for 1 to K. I want to take the number from the end of the list and put it on the beginning of the list. Okay, and I want to do that however many times K happens, and then I don't really do a whole lot else. Let's see. Do I do anything else? I don't return anything else, so it might be that I kind of I've got like 2 steps here. Take the number from the end of the list, and then I can go, end of list is, and then all I have to do is get the number off the end of the list. Now, what I'll need to do is, in Python, I'll need to be able to use some list operations. So there's a couple of different functions in Python lists where you can basically put numbers in or take numbers off the end. And what you need to do is look this up, figure out how do we take the number from the end of the list, and then how do we say, input array dot put it on the beginning of the list. That's what we're trying to figure out. So put end of list on the beginning of the list. And then you want to do this for 1 to K, like that many times. Or maybe, if we want to do things that we know, like our x in range 1 to K plus 1, we know this, K plus 1, we know this from our match phase, right? We know kind of how to loop over up to a certain point. From this point, we have a little bit of partially working Python code. And really all we have to do is figure out how to put the end of the list on the beginning of the list and take the end of the list from take the number from the end of the list to the beginning of the list.